If pride was a person, his name would be Pedro. He wore expensive suits, drove rented luxury cars, and lived in a rented apartment. But beneath all that glitter lived a secret. A secret that began the day he invited his poor mother to his wedding. Not to honor her, but to humiliate her. What Pedro didn't know was that the woman he looked down on as a poor vegetable seller had a secret of her own. A secret powerful enough to shake his world and humble his heart before the entire city. After Pedro's father died, the house became quiet, too quiet. The laughter that once filled the walls was gone. Madame Grace wore black for months, her eyes always red from crying. Pedro tried to be strong. He was only 24, working at a small company in the city. Lydia, his girlfriend, visited often. She wore perfume that filled the room and always carried expensive handbags. One evening, as the rain fell softly, Lydia sat beside Pedro in the living room, crossing her legs. She looked around the house with disgust. "Pedro," she began, "we need to talk." Pedro sighed, tired. "What is it again, Lydia?" "It's your mother," she said coldly. "Since your father was buried, she has refused to move out. It's been months. Don't you think it's time she went back to the village?" Pedro frowned. "She's my mother. Where do you want her to go?" "My father is gone. She has no one else." Lydia rolled her eyes. "Pedro, don't pretend you don't see what's happening. Everyone in the neighborhood is talking. They said your mother is a witch. They said she caused your father's death." Pedro's face darkened. "Stop that, Lydia. Don't ever call my mother that." Lydia stood up angrily. "Why are you defending her? Can't you see what she's doing? Ever since your father died, your business deals have been going down. You even lost that contract last month. Don't you see she's bringing bad luck to us?" Pedro looked at her with disbelief. "That's nonsense. She's just mourning her husband." Lydia walked closer, lowering her voice. "Pedro, listen to me. You have a bright future. Don't let that woman drag you down. My parents said they won't support our marriage if your mother continues living with you. They said no good thing comes from a witch's house." Pedro stared at her, his heart pounding. "My mother is not a witch." "Then choose," Lydia said sharply. "It's either me or her." The words struck him like thunder. For a moment the room went silent, except for the sound of rain beating the window. "Lydia, you can't ask me to choose between you and my mother," he said weakly. She folded her arms. "Then maybe we shouldn't be together. I can't marry a man who lives with a witch." Pedro's chest tightened. He loved Lydia more than he wanted to admit. She was beautiful, smart, and came from a rich family. Losing her would mean losing everything he had worked for. He stood there, confused, hurt, angry. After a long silence, he said softly, "I'll talk to her." Lydia's eyes lit up with victory. "Good. You're doing the right thing, my love. You can't grow while she's here." She kissed him on the cheek and left the room with a smile. Pedro stood alone, staring at the wall. His hands trembled. That night, Madame Grace was in her room. She heard a knock on the door. "My son, come in," she said gently. Pedro entered slowly. He didn't sit. His face was hard. "Mother, we need to talk." Grace smiled softly. "Of course, my son." "Sit down," he shook his head. "I'll stand." Lydia said it's not right for you to stay here anymore." Grace looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" He looked away. "You know people are talking. They said you caused father's death." The words stabbed her heart. She stood slowly. "Pedro, how can you say that?" "I loved your father. I was with him till his last breath." Tears filled her eyes. "Please, my son, you know I have nowhere to go. Your father left me with nothing. I don't even have a house in the village anymore. Let me stay here until I can find my feet." But Pedro's face was cold. "You'll be fine, mother. You can stay with your friends or family. I'll send you something later." "Pedro," her voice cracked, "you are all I have." He looked at her one last time. "I'm sorry, mother, but Lydia is right. I can't lose her." She dropped to her knees, crying, "Pedro, please, don't throw me out. I carried you in this womb for 9 months. I suffered for you." But Pedro frowned. "Mother, don't make this harder. Please, you have to pack your things and leave now." He opened the door and walked out, leaving her on the floor, crying. Rain started falling again outside. Madame Grace packed a few clothes into a small nylon bag. She turned around one last time, staring at the house that once held her laughter. Her tears mixed with the rain as she whispered, "God, take care of my son. He no longer knows what he's doing." She knocked on her friend Aunt Rose's door around midnight. The older woman opened it in surprise. "Grace, what happened to you?" Grace was soaked, shivering. "He sent me away," she said softly. Rose gasped. "Pedro?" Grace nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "He said I unaided his father. Lydia said I'm a witch." He believes her Aunt Rose hugged her tightly. "Come in, my sister. Don't cry. You can stay here as long as you want. God will fight for you." Grace entered quietly. The apartment was small but warm and peaceful. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Rose led her to the couch and brought a towel. "You're soaked, Grace. Sit down and rest." Grace sat slowly, her hands trembling as she wiped her tears. "I lost everything tonight, Rose. My home, my son, my peace." Rose sat beside her and held her hand firmly. "You didn't lose your son, Grace. He lost you. But one day he'll come back crying, and the world will see who was truly blind." Grace closed her eyes as more tears fell. "If he ever comes back, I'll forgive him," she said softly. "But I'll never forget this night." A few days later, Aunt Rose decided to visit Pedro at his office. She couldn't sleep for nights thinking about how badly he had treated his mother. Rose said to herself, "No, I can't just sit and watch. He must listen." Pedro's office was inside a tall glass building in the city center. The receptionist looked surprised to see an elderly woman in a simple dress walk in. "Good afternoon, Ma," she said politely. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, my dear," Rose replied calmly. "Please tell Mr. Pedro Williams that Aunt Rose, his mother's friend, is here to see him." "It's important." The young lady hesitated, then called upstairs. Moments later she said, "He said you can go up, Ma." When Rose entered Pedro's office, she froze for a moment. Everything looked expensive. Leather chairs, shining floors, golden curtains. Pedro sat behind a large desk, dressed in a navy blue suit, looking like a man who had conquered the world. He smiled faintly when he saw her. "Aunt Rose," he said, standing up halfway. "What brings you here?" Rose sighed. "Pedro, I came in peace. I came as a mother." He frowned a little. "Please, say what you came for." "I have a meeting soon." She walked closer and said softly, "Pedro, you don't have to let your mother live with you if that's what you want. But at least help her. Send her something to eat. She has no money, no support. She's living with me now, and I see her pain every day. She prays for you even after what you did." Pedro frowned. "Aunt Rose, please don't start this again." "Pedro, listen to me," Rose continued. "She carried you for 9 months. She fed you when your father was alive, and even when things were hard. You have everything now. Don't forget the hands that raised you." He laughed coldly. "Hands that raised me? Or hands that destroyed my father's life?" Rose's face changed. "Pedro, don't say that. Your mother loved your father. That's what she wants you to believe," Pedro said. "But I know what happened. Everyone knows she used charm on him. She's not innocent. If she could harm my father, she can harm me too." Rose took a deep breath, trying not to cry. "Pedro, my son, don't speak evil against your own blood. Even if people lie, you must remember who she is to you." Pedro became more angry. "Aunt Rose, I'm warning you. Don't ever come to my office again. I don't need you or that woman in my life. I'm doing just fine without both of you." Rose looked at him in shock. "Pedro, you're letting pride destroy you." He pointed to the door. "Please, leave before my secretary throws you out." Rose's voice trembled. "Pedro, even if your mother is not staying with you, please at least—" He cut her off sharply. "Never. I will not send her a single coin. Do you want what happened to my father to happen to me? You and that woman should stay away from me and my fiancée. Don't ever step close to me again." His words were like knives. Then he smirked bitterly and added, "Good luck to you two poor, miserable women." Rose gasped, holding her chest. Tears filled her eyes. "Pedro, you will regret these words one day." He turned away coldly. "I doubt that." Slowly, Aunt Rose walked out of his office. When she got downstairs, she sat on a bench outside the building, shaking her head. How can pride turn a son against his own mother? She said to herself, wiping her tears. Oh Lord, open his eyes before it's too late. That evening, she returned home to Grace. The poor woman was sitting on the couch. When she saw Rose's face, she knew the talk hadn't gone well. He refused, didn't he? Grace asked quietly. Rose nodded sadly. He said he'll never help you. He called you names, Grace. Terrible names. Grace, eyes filled with tears. He said I'm a witch, right? Rose looked down. Grace smiled weakly through the tears. Then let him believe that for now. The day truth walks into his life, he will know who his real enemy is. She continued, I won't curse my son. I'll just wait. One day he'll need his mother, and I'll be there. Not to punish him, but to remind him who he truly is. Rose hugged her tightly. You're a strong woman, Grace. Grace nodded gently. No, I'm just a mother with a broken heart, waiting for God to fix it in his own time. That evening, Pedro returned home, still angry from Aunt Rose's visit. Lydia was sitting on the sofa. She looked up immediately when she saw his face. Baby, what's wrong? She asked. Pedro frowned. You won't believe who came to my office today. Who? She asked quickly. Aunt Rose, my mother's friend. Lydia frowned. What did she want? She came to beg me to start sending my mother money. He laughed bitterly. Can you imagine? She said my mother has nothing to eat. She said I should be helping her. Lydia's eyes flashed with anger. That woman again? I know her house. Let me go there tomorrow and put her in her place. How dare she interfere in your life? Pedro raised a hand calmly. No need. I already dealt with her. She won't come near me again. Lydia relaxed, smiling proudly. Good. You're finally learning to stand up for yourself. You don't owe anyone anything. Not that woman, not her gossiping friend. Pedro sighed. You're right, my love. I've closed that chapter. My future is with you, not them. Lydia smiled sweetly. That's my Pedro. The past is gone. Focus on our future. We'll build an empire together. Pedro smiled faintly, but deep inside, something small and quiet in his heart felt empty. The next morning, Aunt Rose sat at the small dining table with Madame Grace. Grace looked tired but peaceful. She had just finished cleaning the kitchen and was about to prepare tea when Rose said softly, Grace, you can't keep sitting at home doing nothing. Grace sighed. Rose, what can I do? I have no capital, no connections anymore. I've lost everything. I don't even know where to start. Rose smiled warmly. Then start small. We'll start with what we have. Grace looked up in surprise. What do you mean? Rose opened her purse. She brought out an envelope and placed it gently on the table. Take this, she said. It's from my little savings. Use it to start a small vegetable business. You can buy from the farmers and sell to the local markets. You're good with people. You'll rise again, Grace. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Rose, no. I can't take your money. Rose smiled. Don't argue. It's not a loan. It's love. You've always helped others. Now it's your turn to be helped. Grace opened the envelope slowly and saw some cash inside. Her hands shook. Oh, Rose. I don't know what to say. Rose held her hands. Say thank you. And promise me you'll stand again. Grace hugged her tightly. Thank you so much, my best friend. What could I have done without you? Rose hugged her back. You would have done the same for me, Grace. They both smiled through tears. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Madame Grace, a chapter that would soon turn her pain into power. The next morning, Madame Grace woke up before sunrise. For the first time in many weeks, she felt a little hope in her heart. Aunt Rose was still asleep, but Grace quietly dressed up in a simple gown and tied her wrapper. She picked the envelope Rose gave her, held it to her chest and whispered, Lord, bless my friend and bless these little beginnings. She walked out into the fresh morning air. The city streets were still calm, only a few buses moving. She stopped by a small wholesale market, bought baskets of tomatoes, onions and peppers, and rented a tiny wooden table at the roadside corner near a busy junction. At first, people just passed by. They didn't know her. Some buyers went to the other stalls, but Grace kept smiling and greeting everyone politely. Good morning, my dear. Fresh tomatoes here. she called out cheerfully. A young woman stopped. How much, Mama? Grace smiled warmly. Fair price, my daughter. I don't cheat my customers. The woman smiled back and bought from her. It was a small sale, but it made Grace's heart dance. She whispered, Thank you, God. It's a start by afternoon. The sun was hot, and Grace felt tired. Her back ached, her feet hurt, but she didn't complain. She remembered her friend's words, Stand again, Grace. Every evening when she returned home, Rose would welcome her with a smile. How was business today? Grace would smile back, slow but steady. The people are starting to know me. Within weeks, more customers began coming to her. They liked her kindness and honesty. Mama Grace, they would shout, give me those ripe ones. My wife loves your tomatoes. She would laugh and pack them quickly. Tell your wife I'll bring more tomorrow. Life was not easy, but it was peaceful. Grace didn't have much, but she had dignity. She was earning her own money and feeding herself again. One evening, Aunt Rose came home. Grace, she said excitedly, you're becoming famous. Everyone at the market talks about you. They say your vegetables are the freshest and your smile never fades. Grace laughed softly. All glory to God, my sister. I'm just doing my best. Rose sat beside her. You know what I've been thinking? What? Grace asked. We should rent a bigger space. If your business keeps growing like this, you'll need help soon. Grace smiled gently. One step at a time, Rose. For now, let me just thank God for where I am. The same streets that once saw my tears now see my courage. They both laughed, like two sisters who had survived a storm. That night, Grace lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She thought about Pedro. She wondered if he ever thought about her. She prayed quietly, Lord, wherever my son is, protect him. Let him find truth. Far away, Pedro was indeed growing, but not in spirit. He was chasing contracts, fame, and luxury. He no longer mentioned his mother's name. Lydia's influence grew stronger over him. He had a new car, a new office, and a new arrogance. One evening, as they drove home from a dinner party, Lydia laughed and said, Baby, remember that your poor mother's friend came to your office once? I heard she's now selling vegetables too. Pedro smirked. Birds of the same feather. Lydia giggled cruelly. Exactly. Poor women doing poor business. You see why I said you needed to separate yourself from them? Pedro nodded proudly. I already did. My life is better now. One hot afternoon, Madame Grace was arranging her tomatoes and peppers at her roadside stall. Business was moving well that day. Suddenly, Lydia walked up to her. Grace looked up in surprise. Lydia! Lydia laughed loudly. Well, look at you, she said with a cruel smile. So it's true what people said. Pedro's mother now sells tomatoes by the roadside. Grace said nothing at first. She just wiped her hands on her wrapper and kept arranging her tomatoes calmly. Good afternoon, Lydia, she said quietly. Lydia laughed again. Afternoon. You still have manners, I see. Look at you standing under this hot sun, selling vegetables like a beggar. Foolish old woman. Grace's eyes softened, but she didn't respond with anger. She simply said, Lydia, you are not God. Lydia raised her eyebrows. What did you say? I said you are not God, Grace repeated gently. If you were, maybe you could control the future. But you can't, Lydia frowned. Listen to me, old woman. Your son is now a successful man. He has engaged me, and we're getting married soon. Since you left, everything has been moving well for us. He has money, power, and respect now. No thanks to you. Grace sighed softly. I'm happy he's doing well, she said. He's still my son, no matter what happens. Lydia laughed coldly. Don't call him your son. You lost that right when you were thrown out of his house. You should be grateful I allowed you to talk to me now. After all, I'll soon be your daughter-in-law. Grace looked at her with calm eyes. A true wife brings peace to her husband, not pride. One day you'll understand that. Lydia rolled her eyes. Keep your advice. You're just jealous because your time is over. Look at you, selling by the roadside while I'll soon be walking down the aisle in gold heels. Grace looked up at her and smiled faintly. Enjoy your heels, my daughter. Just remember that pride can make even a golden shoe break, Lydia frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Grace shook her head. You'll know when the time comes. Lydia hissed loudly, stepped into her car, and slammed the door, as the car sped away. Weeks later, Pedro and Lydia sat together in their living room. The wedding date had finally been fixed. Lydia was flipping through a bridal catalogue when Pedro spoke quietly. "We have to make this wedding the biggest event this city has ever seen." Lydia smiled proudly. "Of course, my love. My father already booked the hall. The guest list is full of rich and famous people. It will be perfect." Pedro nodded, then leaned closer. "But there's one more thing we need to do." Lydia looked up. "What's that?" Pedro hesitated, then said slowly, "We're going to invite my mother." Lydia's face changed immediately. "What? No, Pedro, don't you dare. That woman will embarrass us. Imagine her standing in that hall with her dirty wrapper and market smell." Pedro smiled coldly. "Relax, my love. We're not inviting her to honor her, we're inviting her to humiliate her." Lydia blinked, surprised. "To humiliate her?" He nodded, grinning slightly. "Yes. Let her see the difference between her world and ours. Let her see what real success looks like. I want her to sit at the back and watch me become everything she thought I'd never be. Don't you trust me?" Lydia's anger melted into a satisfied smile. "You're wicked," she said softly, laughing. Pedro smiled proudly. "Sometimes the wicked must taste their own medicine." Lydia laughed louder. "Fine. Let's do it your way. We'll send her the invitation, but make sure she sits far away from us." Pedro chuckled. "Don't worry. I'll handle it." 3 days later, a man from a courier company walked to Madame Grace's stall with a golden envelope in his hand. "Good afternoon, madam," he said politely. "You have a delivery." Grace wiped her hands on her wrapper and took the envelope. "Thank you," she said softly. When she opened it and saw the words, "The wedding of Pedro Williams and Lydia Roland," her hands began to shake. She sat down slowly on a stool, staring at the card for a long time. Aunt Rose came over. "What's that, Grace?" Grace gave her the card silently. Rose read it and sighed deeply. "So he's finally getting married." Grace nodded weakly. "Yes, my son is getting married, and I had to hear it from a stranger." Rose sighed. "Don't be sad. At least he remembered to send you an invitation." Grace smiled faintly. "No, Rose. He didn't invite me with love. He invited me to make fun of me." Rose frowned. "How can you say that?" Grace sighed. "I know my son's heart. This invitation is not from affection, it's from pride. He wants me to see what he has become." She firmly, "I'm not going." Rose looked at her with concern. "Grace, don't say that. You must go. You are his mother, no matter what he thinks. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Go there and let the world see what Grace truly looks like." Grace looked away. "I don't have the clothes or the courage for that." Rose smiled gently. "Leave that to God. Just prepare your heart." A few days to the wedding, Grace was at her stall early in the morning. Business was going well that day. She was arranging her vegetables when a black car stopped near her. A well-dressed man stepped out, holding a leather briefcase. He looked around as if searching for someone. "Good morning, madam," he said respectfully. "Are you Madam Grace?" She looked up, surprised. "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" The man smiled warmly. "My name is Mr. Stephen. Please don't be alarmed. I was led by the Spirit to come here today. I saw your stall yesterday while driving by, and something in my heart said I should stop and bless you." Grace blinked, confused. "Bless me? Sir, I don't understand." He opened his briefcase and took out a check. "This is for you," he said, handing it over. Grace looked down and gasped. It was a check for a large amount of money, more than she had ever seen in her life. "Sir, I can't take this." "This must be a mistake." Mr. Stevens smiled kindly. "No mistake, Ma. I've already paid for a big supermarket space in your name. It's in the city centre near Greenfield Mall. I was told in my spirit that you are a good woman who has suffered too long. God wants to change your story." Grace's hands trembled as tears filled her eyes. I don't even know what to say. Why me?" The man smiled. "Because God sees you. And he never forgets those who love with a pure heart." Grace covered her face, crying softly. "Thank you, Lord. You never leave your children. Mr. Stephen nodded and said gently, "Go there tomorrow. The manager will give you the keys. Everything is ready. I'll visit again soon." When he left, Grace stood for a long time, staring at the check through her tears. That evening she ran home to Aunt Rose, holding the check close to her chest. "Rose," she cried as she entered the house, "you won't believe what God has done." Rose's eyes widened when she saw the check. "Grace, is this real?" Grace nodded, crying tears of joy. "Yes, my sister. A stranger came to my stall and blessed me. He said God sent him. He has already paid for a supermarket in my name." Rose held her, and they both began to cry. But this time they were tears of happiness. Rose whispered, "You see, Grace? I told you your story isn't over." Grace smiled brightly. God just opened a new chapter. And this time, even those who laughed at me will watch what grace truly means. The sun rose bright that morning. The city was alive with excitement. Expensive cars lined the street leading to Crystal Hall, one of the most beautiful event centers in town. It was the day everyone had been waiting for, the wedding of Pedro Williams and Lydia Roland. Pedro stood in front of the mirror in his groom's suite. His groomsmen were laughing and taking selfies, teasing him about how nervous he looked. He smiled on the outside, but deep inside, a strange emptiness sat quietly in his chest. A moment later, his phone rang. It was Lydia's voice. "Pedro, I still don't understand why you invited that old woman. You know how these things can turn ugly." "I hope she won't embarrass us," Pedro chuckled softly. "Relax, my love. Everything is under control. I already told the ushers to seat her at the back, near the exit. She'll see what I've become, but she won't get close." Lydia laughed over the phone, her tone proud and satisfied. "Good. Let her see what real class looks like. After today, she'll finally understand that her time is over." At the same time, Madame Grace stood in front of her mirror, dressed simply but beautifully. She wore a clean light blue gown that hugged her softly and wrapped her hair neatly. Aunt Rose came out of the bedroom and gasped softly, "Grace, you look beautiful." Grace turned and smiled shyly. "You think so?" "I know so," Rose said warmly. "Your supermarket is doing well, God has lifted you again, and today your son is getting married. Even if he doesn't see your worth, God does." Grace nodded, her eyes gentle. She picked up her small purse and said quietly, "Rose, I'm only going for peace. I'm not going to fight anyone." "I know," Rose replied with a soft smile, "but when light walks into darkness, the truth shows itself. Just go and be yourself." They hugged tightly. Then Grace stepped outside, standing by the roadside to wait for a taxi. She held her purse tighter, trying to wave down another taxi. Just then, a deep car horn sounded behind her. She turned and froze. A shining black Hummer Jeep stopped right in front of her. The door opened and a neatly dressed driver stepped out quickly. "Good morning, Madam Grace," he said respectfully with a smile. "Mr. Stephen sent me. He said I should drive you anywhere you need to go today." Grace's eyes widened in shock. "What? Drive me?" "Yes, Ma," the driver replied. "He said today is a special day for you. The car is fully yours now." He wanted it to be a surprise. Tears filled Grace's eyes instantly. She was so shocked. "Oh Lord, you remembered me." Grace entered the Hummer Jeep slowly. The car drove off, bright and powerful, leaving everyone on the street staring in admiration. The Hummer Jeep glided toward Crystal Hall, where the crowd was already gathering, and where fate waited to reveal the secret no one saw coming. Madame Grace's car stopped in front of the wedding hall. She took a deep breath as the driver stepped out and quickly opened the door for her. Slowly she stepped out of the black Hummer Jeep, holding her small purse tightly. Everyone around the entrance turned to look at her, surprised by the sight of a humble-looking woman stepping out of such a powerful car. Some of the guests whispered, "Who is she?" "She must be one of the bride's rich relatives," another said. The security men greeted her with respect and guided her inside. She moved gracefully, her steps calm and confident, her heart whispering only one quiet prayer. "Lord, let peace follow me into this place." Madame Grace walked quietly into the decorated hall. She walked to an empty seat near the back, where no one would notice her. She sat down gently, holding her small purse on her lap. Her face was calm, but her heart beat fast. People nearby turned to whisper. "Who is that woman?" one asked softly. "I don't know," another replied, "but did you see the car she came in?" "That black Hummer outside belongs to her." Grace heard them but said nothing. She smiled faintly and looked toward the stage. Moments later, Pedro and Lydia entered the hall, hand in hand. Cameras flashed, people clapped, and music grew louder. Lydia waved proudly, smiling for the guests. Pedro walked beside her, trying to look confident. Then, as they walked down the aisle, Pedro's eyes suddenly caught a familiar face in the crowd. His steps slowed. His heart jumped. It was his mother. Madame Grace sat quietly, her eyes filled with warmth and tears. She smiled softly when their eyes met. Pedro froze for a moment. His throat went dry. He didn't expect her to come, and he definitely didn't expect her to arrive in style. Lydia noticed the sudden change on his face. "What's wrong?" she whispered sharply. Pedro blinked quickly. "She's here," he whispered back. Lydia's eyes widened. "Who?" "My mother." Lydia turned her head slightly and saw Madame Grace sitting calmly in her blue gown. Her smile disappeared instantly. "She came?" Lydia hissed quietly. "Oh my God, what is she doing here? How did she even get here?" Pedro swallowed hard. I don't know." Lydia forced a smile for the cameras, but whispered through her teeth, "You told me she wouldn't come. You promised she wouldn't embarrass us." Pedro tried to stay calm. "Relax, she's sitting far away. She won't cause any problem." But deep inside, he wasn't relaxed at all. His heart kept pounding as he looked at his mother, peaceful, graceful, and dignified in her simplicity. As the ceremony began, Pedro tried to focus on the pastor's words, but his mind kept drifting. Every few minutes, his eyes went back to her. For the first time in years, he saw something different in her, something strong and royal that he had never noticed before. And though Lydia smiled and waved at the guests, anger burned quietly inside her. She looked back once more at Madame Grace and muttered under her breath, "Old woman, enjoy your last moment here. After today, I'll make sure you never step close to us again." A few minutes later, while the wedding ceremony was going on, Madame Grace's phone began to ring softly inside her purse. She quietly stepped outside to answer it. "Hello?" she said gently. A strange voice came through the line, deep and urgent. "Madame Grace, please go home now," the voice said quickly. "Your friend Madame Rose is in danger." Grace's heart jumped. "What? Rose? What happened to her?" But before she could get an answer, the line went dead. The number showed private caller. Her hands trembled. She tried calling back, but there was no response. Her chest tightened with fear. "Oh Lord, please don't let anything happen to her," and without thinking twice, she left the hall. A few minutes later, she was home. She pushed the door open in panic. "Rose! Rose, where are you?" she called loudly. Aunt Rose came out from the kitchen, shocked. "Grace? Why are you here so soon? I thought you were still at the wedding." Grace stopped, staring in confusion. You're okay?" Rose frowned. "Of course, I'm fine." "Why are you asking?" Grace still breathing hard. "Someone just called me at the wedding." A strange voice. "He said you were in danger." Rose looked surprised. "In danger? Who would say that? From what number?" Grace shook her head. "It was a private number. I couldn't call back. I got scared and came home immediately." Rose's eyes narrowed. "That doesn't sound normal, Grace. I think someone is playing games with you." Grace looked down, lost in thought. "Maybe you're right. Maybe someone didn't want me to be there." Rose sat beside her and touched her hand. "You shouldn't have left. You were meant to be there. You're his mother." Grace sighed deeply. "I know. But it's okay. I never really wanted to go. I just went because you encouraged me. Maybe this is how God wanted it to be." Rose shook her head sadly. "Grace, don't say that. You've come too far to hide now." But Grace smiled faintly. "Let them have their day, Rose. I'll stay home and pray for them. I've already forgiven them in my heart. I don't need to be there." Rose watched her quietly. "You're a strong woman, Grace. But something about that call doesn't feel right." Grace sighed. "Maybe. But if it was meant for me to stay home, then I will stay. God knows best." Meanwhile, back at the wedding, The hall was silent as the pastor smiled at the couple standing before him. The cameras were ready and everyone leaned forward to hear the final vows. Pastor Daniel looked at Pedro with a gentle smile. "Mr. Pedro Williams," he said clearly, "do you take Miss Lydia Rowland to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Everyone waited for the usual, "Yes, I do." But Pedro stood still, staring at the crowd. His hands trembled. After a long silence, he slowly shook his head. "No," he said quietly. The crowd gasped. Lydia froze, her smile disappearing. "Pedro," she whispered in shock, "what did you just say?" Pedro looked straight at her. "I said no. I will not marry you, Lydia. I was blind, but now I can see. I almost threw away the only person who truly loved me. My mother." The hall went completely quiet. He turned to the crowd. "For years I believed lies. I let pride and money control me. I chased away the woman who gave me life just to please someone who never truly cared. But today, standing here, I finally understand what love means." He faced Lydia again. "Lydia, it's over. I thank God that he opened my eyes before I made the biggest mistake of my life." Lydia's eyes widened in disbelief. "Pedro, are you crazy? You can't do this to me in front of everyone." Pedro shook his head firmly. "It's already done. And thank God it's your father who paid for this wedding, not me. Goodbye, Lydia." Without another word, he turned around and walked out of the hall. The crowd was in shock. Lydia stood there frozen, humiliated and shaking. Tears rolled down her face as she screamed, "Pedro, come back." But he was already gone. A few minutes later, Lydia arrived home in anger and shame. Her makeup was ruined from crying. She pushed open the door, calling his name. "Pedro, where are you? How could you embarrass me like that?" But the house was empty. Then her eyes caught an envelope on the dining table. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. It read, "Lydia, I invited my mother to the wedding not to humiliate her, but to expose you. You made me believe she was the problem, but today I saw the truth. The real problem was you and the pride I let grow inside me. I wanted everyone to see the kind of person you truly are. The wedding was never for you. It was the lesson I needed to learn. I'm gone to make things right with my mother. Don't look for me." "Pedro." The letter slipped from Lydia's hands. She fell to the floor crying. "No, no. This can't be happening," she whispered. Her world crashed around her. The cameras, the fame, the pride, all gone in a single moment. Later that evening, back at Aunt Rose's house, the door opened and Rose's daughter, Anita, walked in wearing her graduation gown. She had just finished university and looked happy and full of life. "Mama!" "I'm home," she shouted, smiling, but when she saw Madame Grace, she ran to hug her. "Auntie Grace, you look happy. My mother told me everything. I'm so proud of you." Grace smiled and hugged her back. "My daughter, welcome. Congratulations on your graduation." Anita sat beside her and said gently, "Don't worry, Mama Grace. I will help you in your new supermarket while I look for a job. You're not alone." Tears filled Grace's eyes. She held Anita's hand. "Thank you, my child. God bless you, and may God also bless the stranger who helped me when I had nothing." They all smiled and spent the evening together eating, talking, and thanking God. Meanwhile, in Lydia's house, Lydia was furious. She was pacing around her room. Her father, Mr. Rowland, sat on the sofa, silent and disappointed. Lydia shouted, "This is your fault, father. You thought you could buy Pedro with money. You thought everything in life is about power and class. Now look, he disgraced me in front of the whole city." Mr. Rowland sighed deeply. "Lydia, stop shouting. I didn't force that boy to leave his mother. He made his own choices." Lydia stamped her foot angrily. "No, we must deal with him. He cannot walk away like this. He embarrassed me. What will I tell my friends? My colleagues at work? They will laugh at me." Mr. Rowland looked at her calmly. "How do you want to deal with him? He doesn't work for our company anymore. We have no control over him. Love is not something you can buy." He sighed and added, "Love cannot be forced, Lydia. You also need to work on yourself. You must change your character. No man wants a proud and cruel wife. Focus on your future." Lydia's eyes filled with angry tears. So that's it. After everything, you just want me to sit quietly. He disgraced me, father. Her father replied softly. He disgraced himself too. But this is life. Sometimes God uses shame to teach people a lesson. Lydia clenched her fists. I don't care. I will never forgive him. How will I face my friends? How will I show my face at work? Mr. Rowland looked at her and said quietly, You will face them with your head up, and you will learn from your mistakes. Lydia turned away, crying silently. Pride was still sitting in her heart like a heavy stone. The next morning, Pedro drove quietly to Gracemart's supermarket. His heart was beating fast. He had not seen his mother for months, not since he threw her out. As he walked into the supermarket, he looked around in surprise. Everything was neat, beautiful, and well arranged. Then he saw her. Anita, Aunt Rose's daughter, was behind the counter. She had just finished helping a customer. She turned and their eyes met. For a moment, Pedro forgot how to speak. She smiled politely. Good morning, sir. How can I help you? Pedro swallowed softly. Good morning. I'm here to see Madame Grace. My mother Anita's smile softened. You're Pedro? She asked gently. He nodded slowly. She's in her office. Go to the end of the hallway. Last door on the right, she said. As he walked past her, he glanced back once more. Something in his heart moved. She seems different. Calm. Kind. Pedro stood in front of his mother's office door. His hands were shaking. He knocked gently. Come in, her voice said softly. He opened the door and saw her, Madame Grace, sitting at her small office desk. She looked up. Their eyes met. Tears immediately filled his eyes. He dropped to his knees. Mama, please forgive me, he said. I sinned against you. I allowed pride to control me. I chased you away. I believed lies. I forgot your tears, your sacrifices. But I promise you, from today, I will never choose any woman over you again. I ended everything with Lydia. Grace looked at him, hurt, shocked, but full of love. Her voice was calm but heavy. Pedro, you broke my heart. You left me when I had nothing. But who am I not to forgive my own son? I forgave you long before today, Pedro cried harder. Thank you, Mama. I don't deserve your love. She sighed. Stand up, my son. Grace wiped her tears. There's something I want to tell you. A stranger, Mr. Stephen, helped me. He paid for this supermarket and sent the Hummer Jeep that drove me to your wedding. Pedro looked at her and smiled softly. Mama, I know. I sent him. Grace's eyes widened. You... What? Pedro nodded. I sent him to help you. I knew you would refuse if I came myself. The supermarket, the shop, the Hummer Jeep. It was me. I wanted you to rise again. I also bought a mansion in your name. It's yours. Mama Grace covered her mouth, tears falling again. Pedro, my son, is this true? Yes, Mama, he said softly. And Aunt Rose too. I bought her a house, a car, and I hired a driver for her. She stood by you when I didn't. Grace began to cry, but this time it was joy. Thank you, God. You restored my child. Pedro smiled shyly. Mama, one more thing. Yes, my son? I think I like Anita. Grace laughed softly. She respects elders. I like her too. Pedro smiled for the first time in peace. A year later, Pedro and Anita got married. It was a quiet, beautiful ceremony, filled with love, not pride. Madame Grace and Aunt Rose smiled with joy, grateful that everything ended in peace, forgiveness, and true happiness. And as for Lydia, she had moved to America with her new husband. Life taught her many hard lessons, and slowly she changed. She was no longer the proud and cruel woman she once was.